So I'm doing this so I can see it in editing. Welcome to, this is episode 4 of Poetry with Python. I guess we'll call it that. So I'm going to just type in here, this is episode 4, so that I can see this. So I think this is episode 4. So I'm working through using Python to create poetry kind of in about 10-minute long chunks to give to my students mainly in creative coding so that they can do something similar for their projects. And but I'm going to put this on YouTube, so we'll see if anyone else thinks it's interesting. Of course, this whole model of me talking in front of the code while I'm running it is based on Dan Schiffman's coding train videos, which are excellent. I'm not as good as him at that, but I think this model of typing and gesturing seems to work pretty well, so I'm going to keep doing it. Okay, so what I've been doing here is, like with each of these videos, is starting my notebook fresh each time to kind of run through that whole process again. I like to run it with Jupyter Notebook from the terminal here on my Mac. If you're doing this in some other computer, then you would have a different way of doing this. But I trust that you've figured that out by now and have a comfortable workflow. The ultimate goal here is that we're working in a notebook as opposed to something else like idle, which would work fine, but would just kind of look different. So where am I? There I am. Creative coding and examples, and the Secret Peaches project is what I've been working on. So here we are again. This is my Python notebook that I've been working on. And just to remind you what I've got here, I've got what's showing up here is red. This is the template for my poem, and I'm switching out different parts of that so that every time I run it, it's going to get a new poem with different things in it. And so eventually we will be able to generate infinite poems, hopefully based on the number of things we can change about it. The trick here in this case is that we need to make sure that those things that we change out are the right kind of thing, both in terms of what they are, hopefully, but also in terms of meter and rhyme, which we're interested in here. So I think for this episode, I want to try to get through at least dealing with syllables and hopefully, and maybe meter as well. I'm going to have to kind of figure this out as I go with the pronouncing library. So let's take a look. So let's make sure this is going to work again. I've got to define my get food and get animals functions, and then I need to run my code, and seems to be working. I am a horse, I live near the beaches. When I'm alone, I eat secret raspberry. We also need to pluralize that last word, by the way, so we'll work on that too. I think you can do that with text blob. We'll find out, right? This is, like I said, this is me figuring this out as we go. This is where I have these extra cells where I was trying different things and working on different things. This is where I scanned the original poem so that I can keep track of the meter and the rhyme scheme that I'm after. So I'm going to keep this cell here. I'm not going to actually run it because there's no code here. This is just for me to view. And this is the cell where I installed pronouncing. I don't need that anymore. And this is where I was kind of playing around with pronouncing a little bit. I'm going to keep that here for now because I'm going to play with that a little bit more. Okay, because we need to make sure that we are getting words that match the number of syllables we need. In this case, if we want to stick with the, we're going to do walrus first. If we stick with walrus, we need to make sure that it has 2 syllables. We also will eventually need to make sure that it's the first syllable is emphasized. But I think most of the time, just off the top of my head, I feel like most of the time 2-syllable animal names are going to have that structure anyway in English. But we can check for that too. Yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head. Okay, so we'll just work on this, and we'll deal with stress later. Okay, so this is the function getAnimal that I used to construct an animal and add it into the template back up here. So what I'm going to try is to make sure that the animal that I have has 2 syllables. So I need to do the pronunciation thing here. I need to, first of all, get the pronunciation list. I find these variable names really long, so I'm just going to go ahead and shorten this to PL just because I don't like looking at all that. So I'm not exactly copying and pasting here. I'm modifying this as I go. So now that I have this PL, I'm going to need to change it when I pass it into this second line, which is going to be like so. So I'm still, most of these things need to stay the same because these are functions built into the program. But now this is going to tell me, so this is going to ask for the word walrus in this case, and then ask if it's, if the first pronunciation of that has the right number of syllables. In this case, this is a function that I need to use that value, so I'm going to give it a name in here. I'm going to put that into a variable called syll count. I'll call it syllable count. Syllable count. I'll be explicit here. So it's syllable counts, and yeah, well, why not? I'll be explicit here too. So pronouncing list. Is that what they called it before? Pronunciation list. This will, of course, make it easier for anyone else to read, so that makes sense. Okay, so just to kind of make sure, so I ran that code just to make sure that there weren't any syntax errors, and it looks fine. Nothing's changed yet because all I've done so far is I've defined this animal, and then I've checked on the pronunciation, but I haven't done anything to that pronunciation list. I just have it. And then here I've returned this value without any checks. So what I need to do is actually check for, what I did here, I checked for walrus, not for animals. So I need to check, in this case, for the appropriate animal. And now it's going to check the actual animal. So I think at this point there are a couple of ways I could approach this, but basically I need to do a test. I need to check the number of syllables in the word that I've retrieved from PyCorpora, and then I need to find out how many syllables are in it and make sure that it's 2. So let's see. The way that it makes sense to me to do this, and I'm sure there's other ways, is just to operate on the list of animals here and shorten that list so we only have animals that are 2 syllables, and then choose from that newly shortened list. I think that's the way I want to do it. There could be other ways, but we'll kind of start with this. I want to just kind of start over here. I'm going to be redoing a lot of this code down here, but I'm going to start. I'm going to keep it for now while I figure out a different way to work through it. So I'm going to do a loop here for, I'll just say animal, and this is a for loop, so I need to name the iteration. I'll call it animal, and then I'll do for animal in, this is my list here. And the colon to indicate that I'm doing this. Notice the indentation here, so this is a for loop, and then everything after it has to be in this loop. To indicate that it's inside of the loop, I have to indent over like that. So for animal in pycorpora.animals.comments animals, I need to do this pronunciation list test. I don't need this line anymore, but I will use something similar. So I'm just going to comment it out so that it's available. So now I'm going to be using this code here. So pronunciation list is now being constructed on this value for animal, and it's going to run that for each one of these. It's going to call that each thing that it runs this on animal, and then it's going to be available for the syllable count function, which I can do here. So now I've got kind of, my lines are getting pretty long, but I think I don't need to go much longer, so I think this will be okay. So pronunciation list is now being passed into the syllable counts, and then we'll be able to do something with that. Oh, my phone just died, so I don't have a timer anymore. Okay, that's all right. I'll do a timer. I'll just get through this example, and then that should be good enough for this episode. So all right. So what I like to do, just to kind of as a sanity check to make sure that I'm seeing that my function is seeing what I think it's seeing, I'm just going to ask it every time it runs to print out the syllable count that it's run on. I didn't keep track of how many animals there were in the PyCorpora list. It was kind of a lot, but shouldn't be too much for some code to handle. So I'm just going to turn off everything else in this function for now with comments by putting the hash mark in front of it, and just run get animal now in kind of testing mode, just to kind of see what it has in it. Oops, I need to process it. My new version of it. There we go. So now I have a list of numbers that are, okay, good. So I got an error. That's good because I can deal with it. I got a list of the syllable counts for the first 20 or so animals. There are more than that. But as you can see, many of them have 2 syllables, but a lot of them don't. Some of them have 3 or 4, which we know we need to reject. The 1 syllables we might be able to keep, but at least the 4s we need to reject. And also we ran into a problem where pronouncing didn't know how to pronounce one of these words, so it couldn't give me the syllable count for this particular animal, whatever it was. It doesn't really matter what it was at this point, because what we need to do is give this function that I'm writing here a bailout. Give it a way to know whether or not it's okay to proceed with the pronunciation. And so we can do this here by, before we ask, this is the part that caused the problem. Before we ask for an item for this list, we need to do a check here to make sure that it has something in that list. So what we can do is do a condition. So we'll say if, and the condition we're testing for is that this list has items in it. And so we need to do that by checking for the length of this list. This is the len function or length function, len, and we're going to ask it for what is the length of pronunciation list. So I'll copy that value into there. This is the, so this would be a number, and if it's nothing, then it would be 0. So I want to make sure that it's at least greater than 0. If it's 0, then I can't proceed, but if it's anything greater than 0 is fine. So that's what I'm checking for here. Make sure my parentheses match up here, and you can see they turn green. I don't know if you can see it that well in this video, but this one is green, and this one over here is green, and that's important whenever you're to check on whenever you do functions within conditionals, because you'll end up with a lot of parentheses, and you have to kind of keep track of it. So it's nice. The nice thing about Python Notebook here is it's telling me what matches. Okay, so this is the thing I want to proceed with. I want to proceed with the syllable count and the print like I had before. So I indented those further to show that they are part of this particular if block. The Python isn't going to proceed to this line unless this line is okay, unless it decides that this list has some items on it and I'm going to move forward. So let's see what happens if I run this now. Maybe I should just put this run right here so you can see it better. And okay, great. So it ran to completion. So I have a long list now, no errors, a long list of numbers, and that seems to be working. At least it got past that error. Okay, so I'm still not done though, because all I've done now is find out what the syllables are for each of these. My goal is to just kind of come up with a shorter list of animals that have 2 syllables. So I'm going to call that keepers, and I'm going to make this as an empty list first, just by making 2 square brackets like that. And so my goal is going to be if this particular animal, every time it runs through this, as it hits an animal and checks the syllable count on that animal, if it fits the pattern I want, which is 2 syllables, it's going to add it to the keepers list, and then I'm going to choose from the keepers list to return one that will fit my poem. So let's see. So the print was just kind of my testing thing. I don't need these things anymore. So I can proceed here. So I've got the syllable count. Now I need to do another condition. So I'm going to do a nested condition. You notice how many layers deep we're going here, but that's kind of how it goes. Now I'm going to check for the size of the actual syllable counts here. So this is another number, as we saw on that output here. So we need to check what it is. I want it to be 2. Maybe 1 later, but we'll just do 2 for now. Actually, this is one of those things I often forget in Python, if we have to do the 2 equal sign to check numbers equivalents, or if we can do is as a value. Let's try is, because that looks a little bit nicer, and we'll see how that goes. So we want to know if it's 2. If it is 2, then we're going to add it to the keepers list using the append function. So we do keepers.append, and then we're going to append animal to that. So if this works, when this function runs, it should have, when it runs through the for loop and these 2 conditional checks, then it should have a new list called keepers with hopefully several possibilities on it. So let's kind of see what we ended up with here. If we come down here to print keepers, why is that red? Oh, yeah, I was out of line there. I had too many spaces in front of the print, so it wasn't lining up with the indentation correctly. So now it should print, hopefully it'll print several animals. Let's see what we got. Okay, that's pretty good. So I don't know how many that is, but a decent number of 2-syllable animals. It would be kind of nice just for variety to have a few more. So we could say if syllable count is less than or equal to 2, and this will add the 1-syllable ones back. Let's see how that list looks. Okay, that's pretty good. So we get aardvark, ape, we end up with cat, dog, fox. I think that's pretty good. I like that list. I think it'll still fit the rhythm too, because the main thing I think is that you have the 2 stresses. So you have I am a duck, I am a yak, whatever. Yeah, we'll just try it and see how it goes. If we end up not liking the output, we can always come back here and change this variable to be equals to. Okay, so now I need to just pick one of them, because this is going to be run once in the function. So I just need to return one random choice from the keepers list that I've now constructed with this whole system here. So let's see. You notice I don't have to, I could assign this random choice to another variable and then just return that variable, but that's a little extra work, so we're just going to do this in the this more straightforward way of just returning a random choice, and it should just give us one value here. Yeah, there we go. Mustang, ferret, whale, boar. So good examples, good candidates to go in here. I've been adding this to the same getAnimal function that I'm invoking here in my template constructor, so if I just run this again, I should see I am a wombat. I am a toad. I am a lynx. Seems to be fitting, and they all seem to be 2 syllables or less, and it seems like we're making some pretty good progress. So that's the end of episode. I don't remember what episode it is. There we go.